Good morning, everybody, and welcome to SACAP's Parent Guide to Matric Support webinar. My name is Sonia Fernandez, and I am the Pretoria campus's WIL coordinator and by profession a registered counsellor. For today, I merely take on the task of being your host and making sure that this is a truly comfortable and informative hour. Just before we launch ourselves into what we have in store for you today, I do have a few house rules that I want to take you through, and then we can happily begin. So you will notice that at the bottom of your taskbar, we do have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please click on the Q&A tab if you have any questions that you want to ask any of our panelists. We are aware, alongside this, that we are on the online space. So this could bring about a whole host of challenges. So please bear with us. We do know that connection is slow. So if load shedding happens or if we have a connection difficulty, please don't stress. We will inevitably carry on, and there is a recording available. Please also be mindful that it is a Saturday, so if you happen to hear strange things in the background, maybe a spouse busy washing the car or a little kitty screaming, we do apologize. The online space is somewhat unprecedented, but yes. Without further ado, I think that I am going to begin. And in trying to open the session, I put a great deal of thought into how this was going to go. I put a great deal of thought into trying to open the session with something that would make time stand still, something particularly mind-blowingly profound, and needless to say, I was grossly unsuccessful. So there is no perfect thing to say in the midst of the adversity that we all face, but I did remember something that my supervisor once told me that I thought would be rather uplifting or even relevant to share right now. So my beloved supervisor once mentioned to me that it's not about what you can teach them, but rather how you make them feel. No learning or success can take place if the soul is not convinced it can do so. It makes me think about my matriculant days. So many decisions, so much pressure, so much responsibility, so many sleepless nights. And our students have a global pandemic to add to that. So we speak to a lot of caregivers, a lot of parents, a lot of educators, a lot of teachers in our profession. And there's one commonality in every conversation. In nurturing young minds, I find that there's one question that pops up the most, and that is asking, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Am I saying enough? Or doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? And after many, many conversations of having nothing to say to a question like that, I can tell you that with the utmost certainty, you most certainly are. So in my matric year, just to give you a short example, in my matric year, my mom was my person. And she could never take the hardship of matric away or make it easier for me, or even mitigate something like a global pandemic for many of the young souls that we work with today. But what she could do was hold a safe space for me, as did many of my educators. She did this by silently sitting on my bed while I panic studied or had a sleepless night, and merely said nothing, merely did nothing, but sat in my space, folding laundry, reading a book, playing Candy Crush, something completely mediocre. And she magically and unknowingly held a very safe space for me by merely showing up. My educators knew exactly what to say, and unconsciously actually, and knew how to normalize the stress and the pressure of everyday life and hold that healing space, even though they didn't realize that they were doing it. So if you're wondering if you are enough, I can tell you that you most certainly are. But that is hopefully my short, profound opening to this amazing webinar. But you're not here to listen to me. You are here to listen to the experts. And I'm hoping that in this hour that you spend with us, that you walk away with something that you perhaps didn't know before or were reminded of. So without further ado, it is with the greatest pleasure that I introduce our panel for today. And our first beloved speaker is Jogini Packery. She will talk to you about how to guide and support your matric through their exams. So Jogini, when you're ready, dear, the floor is all yours.
Good morning, Sonia, our viewers, and once again to the panelists joining us this morning. The Matric teaching year has officially come to a close, and the Matric learners are going full swing into prelims and straight into their final exams. It is officially crunch time, and this morning session will give all the parents in attendance a moment to pause, breathe, and reflect on their role in their child's life in the upcoming months. Like Sonia has mentioned, my name is Jogini Packery. I am a community-based counseling psychologist, the head of campus at SACAP's Johannesburg campus, and a PhD fellow. I am particularly passionate about empowerment through education and young adult development. And today I will be addressing the parents as a member of the village. It is said that it takes a village to raise a child. And what is meant in the essence of this quote is that you're not alone. There is support, there is assistance, there are parents who have been in your position and many more to come. But together, we will figure it all out. So let's get started. Each matric year and each student is faced with their own unique set of challenges. This year is no different. The pandemic, riots, lockdown fluctuations, and many families who have been affected and impacted by the COVID-19 virus. It may seem all the more challenging to think about surviving matric under all of these conditions. But one thing that remains true is that when the world is in chaos, and the one thing that we can control is how we choose to respond. As a parent, your role at this stage may vary. It may be to regulate the home environment so that effective learning can take place, set priorities in the home, a routine or routines that are aligned with your child's study goals, to assist with the basic necessary nutrition, to provide emotional containment and support, among other roles. So let's unpack a few of these on the next slide. A healthy learning environment is very important, with the support of those in the house as well. It can be achievable. To achieve this, you must know what works best for your child. Some children need quietness to process and retain information, while others require some sort of background noise. The essence here as a parent is to help create an environment that is conducive and effective to learning and limits distractions. Distractions, however, play a good role in keeping motivated and focused in a good routine. If screen time is a distraction, then screen time could be used as a good reward once the daily goals are met, which may be attending to revision classes at school, having a study session at home, completing some home chores, and then having an hour or two of screen time as a reward. What we may be careful of as adults as well is falling into the trap of rewarding bad behavior. As a student myself, I sometimes catch myself in the act of misbehaving in this way, especially on a cloudy, gloomy day like today if you're in Johannesburg. I will have an amazing day planner, but end up cuddled under the blankets watching a movie before completing my study goals for the day. Sometimes it's the body communicating that a break is needed, or my goal may not have been as realistic as I thought. But other times there's no excuses and it's just plain bad behavior on my part. So a realistic and balanced approach is necessary, and that is to achieve our goals. But also to have a fun and relax and be able to relax while we're doing so. As we proceed to the next slide, I want to caution all parents to be careful not to take over control of these elements, but to work with your child to help them explore the workspace and rhythms that work for them and help them stay accountable at this time. But do not hover, do not overcuddle. Try to support from a distance. In the next slide, we see that the role of parents during this time is rather tricky. There are ways of knowing if you need to get closer or if you need to take a step back, and that is through observation and communication. Be aware and alert of your child's study rhythms. If they're too distracted for too long, Then step in to regulate. In doing so, open communication becomes essential. What your child may need, or what your child may have needed from the ages of 13 and maybe even at 15 may have drastically changed by 17 or 18. This may also hold true for households that have more than one child to attend to. The support that I may have needed during my matric year may not have benefited my siblings in their years. Be able to talk and engage with your child and actually listen to their needs. Do not listen to respond. That's often a mistake that we make, but actually to understand and meet your child at their level of need. As adults, the assumption is that we've mastered the skill of coping with the world's challenges and the big emotions that come with it. As a result, though, we are expected to be able to model healthy relationships and behaviors to our children. Many parents to younger children will attest that children rarely do what we tell them to do, but they quickly pick up and mimic what we do and what we say, even the things we don't want them to repeat. When you're feeling anxious, overwhelmed, nervous, agitated, irritated, annoyed, or restless, when engaging with your child, take a deep breath and remember the 5 R's that you will see on the screen to come, which is informed by a trauma-informed model for breaking trauma cycles. This is a feedback loop that will allow you to know your limits as a parent and for you to know when you need to reach out to your support system. The first R is to realize your feelings, your thought patterns, and your outwardly behaviors. This requires you to be self-aware and engage from a place of purpose. Recognize the patterns that are not working out well when you engage with your child. If asking about a study plan always leads to an argument, then approach it from a different approach. This requires you to try different responses, which is the third R. For example, do not just ask about the study plan. Rather sit down, plan together, and then place the plan on a wall or fridge to reinforce accountability. What the fourth R requests of us is to resist falling back into old patterns. So the way our brains rewire our processes are setting up default patterns. It will, however, take time, conscious effort, and willingness to change these default patterns. They may be negative patterns of engagement and unhealthy learning environments. An example of this is studying in a dining room, for instance, compared to relaxing in your bedroom. On a chilly day like today, you may think it easier to study in bed, but because the bedroom is associated with relaxation, distractions may be harder to fight off in order to stay focused. The fourth R moves from resisting old patterns of negative behaviors and engagement to reintegration. And this is where new patterns need to be wired into our daily practices so that they can serve as a rewiring our neural pathways that create newer, healthier default ways of being. If you're struggling with this reflection loop and the negative patterns tend to keep taking over, it may be a good time to reach out to a counselor or a therapist to explore your own patterns of engagement. This goal is to work as a team with your child. This is ultimately knowing that it is their experience or their matric experience. And as tough as it might be, this year is a practice run for what life will have in store for them. This is the year that they realize that their actions have real life consequences and that the effort they put into their goals often directly impacts the outcomes and the fruit that they bear. Your role is to be that guide for setting consistent routines in the home and to mirror positive behaviors, as we see us moving into the next slide. Moving on to SMART goals and goal-setting processes. This is another critical role for the parent in the life of a matric student or learner. And this role is to ensure that goal setting takes place and that plans are actually put into place for achieving those goals. The SMART goal model is a guide for helping your child not only think purposefully, but think critically about their goals and their plans. The essence here is to remember that time is a scarce resource and we need to invest and spend it wisely. Wasting time in the next few months will not serve a purpose in surviving and thriving matric goals. However, December will offer plenty leisure time, which could serve as a reward once the matric goals are achieved. Now, the next slide is a crucial one. And as a parent, this is where your role can become extremely influential. Once matric goals are set and the plan is put into place with a schedule of rewards, we are often reminded that matric is a rite of passage into young adulthood. And your matric results more than often determine the types of doors of opportunity that can be open. A parent's role at this stage is not only to know your child and engage with your child regularly, but also to understand their career goals and dreams. For instance, you may seek a career for your child, and it could be simply helping them explore career options via the internet. I will use the example of the psychology field. For learners wanting to join the field of psychology and become a practicing psychologist, they should know that it takes 3 years of undergrad, another year of honors, and another 2 or 3 years to specialize in a practicing master's program. But the entry into honors and masters is highly competitive. If that is the dream, then it's certainly worth the chase, because learning in this field is lifelong in any case. I've been at it for 15 years. But what happens if you don't make it for degree entry? Well, you can use your next year to improve your matric grades, or you can complete the higher certificate in the field, which will allow you to apply for degree entrance the year thereafter. So the point here is that there's always options, and the only race that our learners should be taking part in when it comes to their careers, it should be the race with themselves each day. Comparisons to others, narrow-minded career plans that do not make allowance for alternative plans if plan A doesn't go as planned, is not only dangerous, but it places unnecessary pressure on learners, which may affect their mental health. Realistically speaking, if we want our children to perform at their best, they must be at their best. Being in distress about their outcomes for the year will negatively impact the overall experience. Some of these negative impacts are discussed over the next 2 slides. Let's start off with burnout. This is the risk when we are in states of distress for too long periods of time. Distress may be caused when options are narrowed, plans and routines are not carefully set or followed through, and the pressure is unrealistic. It not only affects your child's ability to focus at the task at hand, but it will leave them vulnerable to fatigue, exhaustion, affecting their brain's ability to function optimally. Without a proper plan, they may become overwhelmed and feel as if they're all over the place and going nowhere at the same time. It's okay to feel anxious and overwhelmed from time to time, but if the challenges persist over a few weeks and affects your child's ability to achieve their daily goals, then speaking to a professional is the next step. Being a human being means each day comes with different sets of challenges, and we cope with each day differently. While it's perfectly fine to have a down day and struggle with low emotions, as we see on the next slide, given everything going on around us especially, it is important for parents to be aware of the following. sudden behavior changes, mood changes, changes in eating and sleeping habits, a sudden decline in grades, a lack of interest in things that were of interest before, and a general lack of joy towards things that would have otherwise derived happiness. These are potential signs of depression and must be taken in all cases seriously. Professional help should definitely be sought after. While it is great to make it to matric, and just as great to want to excel at the matric year, it should not be at the cost of our children's wellness. Suicide risks have been common among matric-going learners for a number of reasons. Because the stakes are so high in this year, it may often feel like the be-all and end-all. But it is not, and it is our job as parents to make sure that that message is realized. If this year does not go as planned, it will be disappointing. Learning to cope with feelings of disappointment and failure is important life skills that parents should model and lead. Also keeping in mind the harsh reality of application rejections. It is never easy to accept rejection, and these experiences should be addressed in therapy, just as we would seek professional help for a broken leg. And I conclude my segment this morning reiterating that your role as a parent is to provide support from a healthy distance, the essence of which is to be the safety net when your child feels like they are free falling into the abyss. The details for mental health support will also be included in your info packs, but you're welcome to take a picture of the screen and ensure that you keep these details close by. And with that, I would like to now hand over to registered counselor Kirsten Harrison, who will be unpacking the necessary emotional support needed for success. Kirsten, over to you.
Thanks so much for that, Jogini. Good morning to everyone. I hope everyone is warm and shielded from the wind of this morning. Apologies if you can hear my cat meowing in the background. He does get a little bit needy when it is cold. I think just to start off by saying that I think when each and every single one of you watched your child begin high school, I don't think that any of you could have predicted that we would have been in the situation that we find ourselves in now. And especially having to go through so many of the changes that we've experienced in the past 18 plus months. We can't neglect the way that it has impacted us and still continues to impact us. And despite these uncertain times, we need to continue to progress with these important events such as matric. You know, these are things that we can't just put on the sideline. We have to move forward and we have to find a way to make it work. You may be sitting there wondering if, you know, how can you actually support your child while they're trying to, you know, achieve the results that they want to? What role can you play while you're watching them navigate this really stressful and challenging time? And I'm hoping the following information will at least start that conversation and help us, start picturing what are some of the important aspects to be mindful of. So to start off, I just want to give a little bit of information about the different learning styles that we see. And I think what's crucial here is that we understand that seeing these styles as kind of added information that help us understand the way that a person approaches their studies and approaches learning. It's not sort of something that is set in stone and something for us to fixate on. It's just added information to help us along the process. So I'm going to chat a little bit about 6 different learning styles, and it's important to think about, you know, perhaps which one resonates the most with your child, and think about it in the sense of, are there different resources or things that you can make available based on your child's learning style to help them along the process? these styles are things that can change over time as well. So it's not as if I'm, a visual learner today, that's the way that it will be for the rest of my life. It can adapt and it can change. So just be mindful of that too. And often you may see that a person has a dominant style, but there's generally aspects of all of these different styles within us. So it's more about which one makes us feel the most confident, which one makes us feel that, we are the most comfortable when we're engaging in that way. So to start off, we have the visual learner, and this is a learner that prefers to learn by observing things. So here you'll see the use of a lot of things like pictures and diagrams and mind maps, and really being able to visualize the information. A learner that prefers this style struggles to sort of read straight out of the textbook. They need to be able to take that and draw up a mind map, or find a way to visually present the information, even on a blackboard or something like that, where they can see what it looks like and see the links, for example. The next one is the auditory learner. So these are learners that are extremely good listeners. So these learners definitely thrive when they're able to listen to information. So for example, verbal presentations such as lectures or speeches, even listening to a TED talk on a specific topic. These learners really thrive in those kind of environments where they can listen to the information, because that's how they pick up the most detail. And then we have the verbal learner, and this is a learner that prefers using words, so both in speech and in writing, but this is a learner that thrives in an environment where they can perhaps explain a concept to another person, or they can write out an explanation. For them, that really is helpful. And I suppose an example of how you could support your child if you find that they are a verbal learner is to listen to them, allow them the opportunity to explain the different concepts or explain the content that they're learning to you, because that's how they integrate the information. Then we have the physical learner, and this is a learner that prefers hands-on experiences. So they learn best when they can rather do opposed to listen or see. They want to actually take a more practical approach to the studies. And then we have the social learner. So this is a learner that thrives in environments where there are other people, such as study groups. And you may be sitting there thinking, geez, if my child has to study with a group of their friends, there's no studies that are going to be done then. But a child that is leaning more towards this approach needs that kind of support and thrives off of it when they find themselves in a group setting where they can support and collaborate with others, brainstorming, discussing different ideas and concepts. That's where they really integrate the information best. And then lastly, we have the solitary learner. And these learners prefer to self-study and work alone. So if your child is a solitary learner, if you find yourself kind of going and asking them to explain these concepts to you, or draw a mind map, or listen to this lecture, that's not the way that they integrate the information. That's not the best approach for them. So although on paper, these may seem like the common strategies and techniques that we use, it's important to think about, in what sort of environment does my child feel the most comfortable? And we'll unpack that a little bit more in the next slide when we start talking about aspects like communication and what are important features. So to start off, I think really going off of the learning styles, the only way that you're going to know when your child feels the most comfortable and confident is by having that conversation with them. Purely by observing them and sort of seeing them in the different environments isn't going to give you that information. You need to hear it from them. because you may find yourself in a position where you are encouraging them to use different skills and techniques that may have worked for you or may have worked in an article that you read, for example. But unless you open that conversation and start communicating with your child about what works for them, you're not going to know where they feel the most confident. So I suppose to echo off of what Jogini was sharing with us in terms of the communication and trying to have that open communication channel with your child. Sometimes parents can feel that they're doing all they possibly can to assist their child. And yes, they may be doing that, but it might not be the type of support that the child needs in that space. So a nice way to start that conversation would be to ask something like, what can I do to help you along in this process? And in that, you're not communicating that I'm going to do this for you, but you're communicating that I'm here and I'm supporting you and I'm walking alongside you while you take ownership of this process. So if you can start that conversation, it can give you a nice idea of where you can perhaps start if it's more of that, support that your child needs. Bringing us to the next point of the support versus practical advice, we need to take a step back and think about, what does support mean? Support doesn't necessarily mean doing everything for the child, finding all the articles for them, or doing things like that. Sometimes support just means merely being there. So at the end of the day, your child needs to take ownership of the exam and the study process. If parents are providing too much practical advice, this may take away from the child developing their own approach and their own rhythm. So if you sort of sit back and you say, look, well, this is what works best for me, I think you should try this. Your child trusts you, right? They listen to you. Chances are they're going to try and make that work no matter what. What happens there is that although it's quite helpful, it can also take away from the child learning about the different options out there, because there's a lot of different options out there, a lot of different techniques and approaches and things like that learners can use. And if we sort of give it to the child in one way, they may stop being curious about what else is out there. And we can't expect a technique that works for one to work for another, right? We're all different. And it's important to be curious about the way that your child is learning and speak to them about that. Ask questions about it. Is it working for them? Is it not working for them? What else have they tried? When did they feel the most confident when they approached their studies in the past? When did they feel the least confident? Asking questions like this can help us get an idea of what's worked and what hasn't worked, and also what hasn't been tried yet. I think understanding that the study and the exam process is a stressful one, really understanding that and being able to provide that crucial emotional support will allow your child to flourish in a safe and supportive environment where they have autonomy and they know that their parent is there as a safety net if things become too tough, but they know that they are the ones that are taking ownership of this process. And it also, yes, I suppose highlights more of the environmental factors that we need to be considerate of as well. That understanding that the exam process from the beginning of the studies all the way through to writing the exams and even waiting for the results is a long-term process, right? It's important to understand that that is going to be your child's priority for a certain period of time. So just be mindful of the expectations that you have of them. While it's important to try and keep routines as consistent as possible, there may need to be changes during this time, and there may even need to be adjustments from your side within the environment. So for example, maybe the optimal study area for your child is the lounge. This means that they need a certain level of quiet and privacy, which may disrupt your usual routines. So we need to be mindful of the environmental factors. And while we don't want to take away too much of our usual routine, we need to think about how we can be flexible for this period of time and ensure that the child is supported. And then talking about self-care, which is one of the most crucial aspects when we do go through a stressful time. It's important that your child is looking after themselves during the exam period, because it's easy for things like taking a break or switching off to be pushed to the side in order to cram more information. We sort of feel like we don't have enough time. There isn't time to take breaks. There isn't time to switch off. We need to 100% be focused on the studies. And while that does seem doable on paper, it's not realistic when we are mindful that we're human beings and we do need to be able to switch off. We have a lot going on alongside the study process as well. So you want to make sure that you're checking in with your child regarding their schedule, encouraging them to drink water and take regular breaks, making sure that they're eating regularly and getting enough sleep. We're going to hear quite a bit about that from our next speaker, Robyn. It's important to think about what are aspects that are going to make your child an effective learner. And sometimes that does mean being able to take a break, switch off, and disconnect from the studies for a period of time. So that it can't be a situation of, your child is sort of sitting with the books from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 p.m. That doesn't necessarily mean it's effective studying. So in conclusion, while this process may seem very daunting and overwhelming, not only for your child, but for you too, it's important to remember that you're nearing closer towards the end of quite a significant life event. And with that, it brings a lot of changes and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of question marks. What does next year look like? What is it going to look like? Are we going to be able to enroll in that course that we wanted to? And how do we sort of go about that? So as much as it is daunting and stressful, there are aspects that you can look at to make this more manageable. And studying and writing exams doesn't have to be a dreaded process. And while there's no one size fits all, you are able to create a safe and encouraging environment for your child. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our next speaker, Robyn-Leigh Mentor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robyn-Leigh Mentor, and I am a registered dietitian. I'm very excited to be sharing my talk with the parents today. Growing up in a family of healthcare professionals, my interest in food and science started at a young age, and today I get to share my passion with the world by educating and supporting clients who come and see me. So before I get into the talk, I would like you to think about the following. And it is, do you snack or eat while, in this case for the parents, while working? And what are some of the snacks that you consume while working? And who of you become tired after 20 minutes after snacking or eating? And is it easy to focus when you are tired? So the reason why I'm saying this is because today, in order to stay healthy, focused, and fit, it is important that we eat a variety of foods on a daily basis. And I'm sure that we've all heard of this before, but the reason why we need to eat a variety of different types of food regularly is that because one type of food does not contain all the nutrients, such as starchy foods, also known as carbohydrates, protein, as well as healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals are all what the body needs in order to perform optimally. So therefore, in order to ensure that the student's body gets all the nutrients it requires, it is important to eat a variety of foods as often as possible, and preferably at all meals. So in addition, it is also important for the students not to be skipping meals. An example of this would be breakfast. So if your child went to bed late and have an early morning lecture, it's still important not to skip breakfast. And research has shown that the most common eating behaviors among students, as you can see on the slide, are number 1, a skipping of meals, number 2, a low intake of fruits and vegetables, and thirdly, a high consumption of fats and sodium, which can be linked to processed food. So it is important to think about who does most of the shopping at home, and this is on the next slide. who believes that healthy eating is expensive, and why do you say that? So today, the purpose of my talk is to empower each and every one of you to buy on a budget and still eat healthy and delicious food, which brings me to affordable nutrition. While South Africa is food secure as a country, this is not always the case at household level. And I think one that we can all relate to is the COVID-19 pandemic. It had led to unemployment, job losses, and perhaps a reduction in income for some households. And in terms of nutrition, we may have begun to opt for somewhat cheaper meals due to finances. So now for the parents, I have a little question. And there are two questions, and this is linked to the cost of healthy eating being expensive. So what would be the cost of a Big Mac meal from McDonald's? And then what do you think is the cost of a KFC fully loaded box meal? And then for the healthier side, what do you think would be the cost of a whole wheat sandwich and an apple? Okay, and what is the cost, do you think would be the cost of a homemade pasta salad? Somebody said that they just ordered one. I don't know if it's the Big Mac meal or if it's the KFC fully loaded. Okay, there we go. Big Mac meal, approximately 60 Rand, and KFC fully loaded, 90 Rand. Okay, sandwich, 65 Rand. Okay, so on the next slide, here is a comparison between the prices. So you can see a Big Mac meal from McDonald's is approximately 80 Rand. A homemade whole wheat cheese sandwich with the fruit on the side would roughly cost you 14 Rand. And a KFC fully loaded box meal is about 75 Rand. And a homemade pasta salad, you can see I calculated exactly how much pasta you'd be using. There'd be a pepper, some mozzarella, some plain yogurt, and it would be roughly 33 Rand. So the reason why we did this comparison is because usually cost-effective meal options have a higher calorie density due to a high fat level and a lower nutrient content, whereas foods which has a greater nutritional value and content are generally more expensive. But this is not always the case, and I'm here to give you some helpful tips on making the rand go further. So these are some of my tips. And the first one would be, in terms of cost-effective shopping, would be to compile a grocery list and stick to it. The second one would be planning meals beforehand. So planning what you're going to be cooking for the week. And then when you're going shopping, that would link to compiling a grocery list. Another little tip would be comparing prices. This could be before you go shopping. You could look at newsletters, pamphlets, specials online, or it could be comparing prices when in store. And here's a little example on the small image over there. It is a comparison between the John West tuna, which is 29 Rand, and then it is compared with the Pick and Pay tuna, which is about 17.99. So there we can see when comparing prices, the generic brand or the house brand tends to be cheaper. Another little tip would be to purchase fresh produce when it is in season. And a little example of this would be avos. I mean, when you're buying it and it's not in season, it is very expensive. And then another tip would be to prepare meats yourself. So generally chicken strips, burgers, and kebabs tend to be more costly when it's ready prepared. And then another tip would be to prepare meals. So ready prepared meals tend to be more costly, so therefore you'd prepare meals from scratch, because meals which are already prepared generally are high in calories, fats, and sodium. So on the next slide, I touched a bit on planning meals, and it is better for students to pack their meals to classes in order to prevent them from ordering takeout. This saves money, time, as well as calories. And then any leftovers can be frozen or recreated into another meal, which again would be cost saving and reduce waste. So on the next slide, we'll just look at some simple healthy meals. So where one eats, who cooks it, and how much is consumed are patterns of behavior and choice. And there is no stereotypic adult lifestyle. So for today's students, there are multiple influences of behavior and knowledge on nutrition and health. such as, I think one that we can all relate to would be information found on social media, which often may leave students asking questions such as, what is healthy eating? What is unhealthy eating? Should I gain weight or should I lose weight? Should I be buying more organic or locally grown food? Or should I be trying a juice cleanse or a detox? So therefore, when we're looking at nutrition on social media, we have to be very critical and look at the source, the appeal of the message, the scientific value, as well as if there is an application of evidence-based information. And in doing this, it is important to know that healthy eating is not as complicated as it may seem to be. Simply put, there are 5 food groups. We can see on the slide, there are carbohydrates, protein, fats, dairy, and fruits and vegetables. Each food category has a different nutritional benefit. So carbohydrates is the body and the brain's preferred source of energy. Proteins are important for our brain, our neurological system, blood, muscles, skin, and hair. And fats are responsible for our insulation, our vitamin absorption, as well as hormone production. Dairy, as we know, are the best sources of calcium, but they also supply protein and as well as vitamins A and D if they are fortified. And then fruits and vegetables are excellent sources of vitamins and minerals which boost our immune system, and aid in growth and development. So how do we incorporate each of these food categories into our everyday life? And a simple way to do it is to use this My Plate food model. So you can see it depicts all 5 food groups which can be incorporated into a meal. And simply put, you have to choose a particular food from a group which you will find in the little student pack which we will send with you. And you'll choose it and it can be assembled into a meal. So a little example of this would be pasta, which would be your grain, chickpeas would be your protein, broccoli would be your vegetables, and then you can have a yogurt and a fruit on the side as a snack. Another little example would be some chicken, which would be the protein. You could use potatoes as the grain, beetroot as a vegetable, and then you can have an apple and a yogurt on the side as a snack. And the next slide are just some additional tips which can be used, such as using dried beans, peas, and lentils as an alternative to meat, so more plant-based sources. And then when cutting meat, using lean sources, or you could remove any fat or skin to reduce the fat content. When choosing fruits and vegetables, rather opt for choosing whole fruits and vegetables instead of opting for juices and canned fruit, and then playing around with fruits and vegetables, and lastly choosing low fat and non-fat sources. And that is it for today. Thank you so much to the parents for joining and listening to my talk.
To all of our panelists, I cannot thank you enough. It never ceases to amaze me how every single event we host, I learn something new. But for every single one of you, after Jogini, after you spoke, I keep on having my mother's voice in my head, where she tells me constantly, we made you, we kept you alive, who knows you better than I? And I think about that so much because I feel like there's this space where parents forget that their gut is so unbelievably important. And you know your kid better than anybody else. And you know how to look after them and how to support them. And sometimes I think that you just need the reminder that nobody knows your child better than you do. And the one thing that is not scarce in the world right now is negativity. So we're constantly telling parents and we're constantly telling students as well, focus on what's strong, not what's wrong. If you're ever confused or stumbling as to how you want to support this beautiful little soul, focus on what's strong, not what's wrong. I think leading with empowerment never has a negative result. I think you'll be nicely surprised to see what that generates. And Kirsten, in speaking about how we learn on that front, I was the kind of student that had highlighters and mind maps and color and videos, and I had to tangibly learn with everything. And it took me many years. I don't even think 12 years of being in school taught me how I learn or what's best for me, up until I got into tertiary education and all of that was explained. And on that front, you know your kids, you really do, and they're starting to know themselves. So if they are the black and white kind of learners, let them be strategic. If they are the colorful learners, I promise you, highlighters are their best friends, and any kind of color you can get them. But it's very interesting to know that you learn in so many different capacities, from visual, auditory, verbal, physical, social. All of those categories are what most schools are trying to integrate and kind of dabble with. So just being able to see what your kids are most comfortable with, what is beneficial to them, without having all the pressure of one particular study style and moving on with that and not necessarily generating results from it. And to dearest Robyn, I always think, I know matriculants are invariably, they don't have little bodies. They've actually got quite big bodies. And I would like to think that they eat quite a bit, particularly when you're feeling a little bit stressed or you're still growing. So I think about what these little bodies go through, or not so little bodies, and the emotional strain, the physical strain, the social strain, their social bodies, the global pandemic, all the negativity that goes around with that. And a healthy outside starts with a healthy inside. So thank you to all of our panelists. You really have been amazing. And to our wonderful audience, thank you for taking an hour out of your Saturday where you could have been doing anything else. I hope that you've walked away with some kind of insight. I hope that you've walked away with something that you perhaps weren't cognizant of before. So to anybody watching the rugby this afternoon, I hope you enjoy it. I hope that you get to go and cuddle up and relax. And yes, thank you to absolutely everyone for your participation today.